I won't spoil plot details in this video, but we'll be talking extensively about the gameplay and how I feel about Half-Life Alyx. Half-Life Alyx is VR's Half-Life 1. It shows that it can be done, and does what it does to a sky-high standard. But when the game ended and I returned to the main menu, my first feeling was disappointment. What a horrible thing to feel after playing the most anticipated game I could think of. And it's not like I didn't enjoy it. I really did, and will no doubt replay it many times in many different ways. Even while making this video, I'm craving jumping back in and reliving some of the moments that I've had with it. So why disappointment? For a while I couldn't understand it either. It was only after talking to myself in the shower that I finally figured it out. Half-Life Alyx is VR's Half-Life 1. It was necessary. But what I really want is VR's Half-Life 2. Half-Life Alyx does what it does brilliantly, but I'm far more excited for what comes next for virtual reality. This game has tackled the problems and has laid strong foundations for future games to build upon. And that's what I'm craving now, for them to elaborate on the gameplay and to see just how far they can push it. That's what they did with Half-Life 2. I'll give you an example. Half-Life Alyx introduces enemies, shows their strengths and weaknesses, then lets you fight them in increasingly elaborate scenarios. Then it moves on to something else. That's pretty much what any shooter does. Half-Life 2 was special because it would get that and then twist it in unexpected ways, like letting you control the enemy or giving you a gun that suddenly transformed the world into hundreds of projectiles that you could use. And just when you thought you had it sussed, it would ramp it up to the next level by letting you use the enemies themselves as projectiles. It wouldn't matter if Half-Life Alyx did exactly those things. It's been done now. It's hard for me to say what I want from Valve because, honestly, I want to be surprised by some new gameplay mechanics that I've never seen before. In comparison to Half-Life 2's chapters, those found in this game are rather vanilla. But it's not really fair to blame Half-Life Alyx for being vanilla, is it? Not when it's the first big, proper, high-budget VR game out there, with a full-length campaign. VR is this game's unique twist, and it changes everything, making even the most mundane of actions feel fleshed out and satisfying. And I'm happy to say it proves that it's more than just a gimmick. It changes everything. The wow factor is there. Even for me, a player with prior experience of VR, the wow in this game still lasts for hours. And rather brilliantly, it returns every time I jump back into it after a break. When it comes to VR's gameplay potential, by the time you finish the campaign, I'm sure you too will be convinced of the new possibilities it enables. You'll be wanting more. And maybe that's why I was disappointed that it didn't do more. To get a feeling for how VR changes things, you simply have to look at a single room. In Half-Life 2, it would comprise of a few enemies and maybe an item to pick up. An experienced player could pass it in seconds. But in virtual reality, it's a fully fleshed out place that you could spend minutes in, even if it's not an essential area. While I agree that this game is about the same duration as the other Half-Life games, it's also smaller and shorter. You clear fewer rooms, cover less ground, shoot fewer enemies, and you explore fewer environments. From the footage you've seen of this game, you might assume that it's all set in and around dilapidated buildings infested with alien plants. And you'd be right. If you're lucky, you'll get different colours of lighting to mix things up a bit. I know it's meant to be set in City 17, but so was Half-Life 2, and that game managed a diverse array of environments that helped give each chapter a very unique flavour. The chapters of Half-Life Alyx may have different gameplay twists, but they blur into one another thanks to the murky, drab colour palette. So that doesn't help Half-Life Alyx. Its gameplay may be more vivid, but it all looks samey, and if you were to try and summarise your travels through this game in a single paragraph, when compared with, say, Half-Life 1, Alyx's would sound decidedly less epic. But I see what Valve have done here. They know that VR makes more of less, and have transformed the Half-Life series from being a shooter into being a scavenging simulator. You have less inventory space and less ammunition than ever before. You're never more than one fight away from running out of everything. This strongly encourages you to scavenge your environments for whatever you can find. Even later on in the game, simply finding a pistol magazine is cause for celebration. You'll have to make difficult decisions like choosing between carrying a medic kit or a grenade. Maybe you'll decide it's worth sacrificing a free hand just to carry one extra item into the next battle. And maybe you'll take the time to exploit an enemy's weakness, just to save a few precious bullets for whatever lies around the next corner. I'm not always happy with this. One thing I was expecting from a smaller arsenal of weapons was for each to be more unique, but it just isn't the case here. Your gun collection is lacking, with two of them serving almost identical purposes to the point where I didn't even care which one I had out, as long as they had ammo in. And the other gun I have a problem with is the shotgun. On my first playthrough I found so little ammunition for it that I barely knew the weapon, even after having finished the game. That was a shame, because the few times I did use it, it felt immensely satisfying and powerful. But being the hoarder that I am, I quickly noticed how scarce the ammo was for it, and so chose to reserve the gun's use for special occasions. As a result, I ended up wasting most of its ammo against invincible enemies, and I ended the game without knowing much about this weapon at all. But on my second playthrough, I've been using the shotgun whenever I've had the chance, and oddly enough, I've discovered a lot more ammo for it. I think this game has some kind of invisible director, similar to Left 4 Dead. I can only assume it tracks your stats, then scatters more ammo in the next room for you to find if you're running low on something. So in other words, the more you use the shotgun, the more ammo you're given and the more often you can use it. I just wish I had known that on my first playthrough, as I'd have had a lot more fun knowing that the shotgun could be a viable weapon for me to frequently switch to against tougher opponents. I'm pretty sure in my first playthrough I found a grand total of about 40 shells in the entire game. The shotgun has traditionally been my favourite weapon. The one found in Half-Life 2 was brilliant. Maybe I should mod Half-Life Alyx so that I only have a shotgun and infinite ammo. I'd be well up for a playthrough of that. While we're on the topic of scavenging, we've got to discuss Resin. This underexplained element is scattered throughout this game, ultimately letting you buy weapon upgrades once you've found enough. This mechanic is to get you invested in your current playthrough, and to take pride in searching each and every room from top to bottom. In earlier Half-Life games, it took just a supply crate and a health station, and you'd be in the same situation as any other player at that point in the game. But the addition of Resin means that players who take the time to scavenge are rewarded for doing so, and will have a better chance of winning later on. To me, the Resin as a gameplay mechanic is a trade-off. It incentivizes you to explore, but it also means you end up exploring with the intention of finding Resin, rather than exploring for the pure enjoyment of the unknown and of what you might find. And on the occasions when you don't find any Resin, you end up feeling betrayed. And while I didn't get to use the shotgun much, I did pump a load of Resin into upgrades for it. What a waste. I had an autoloader and everything, and think it saw action about twice. But the autoloaders for the other weapons? Oh, they were great. With the pistol, it removes the dilemma of, do you bother reloading when there are just a few bullets left in the magazine? And with another weapon, it effectively transforms it into a hassle-free point-and-shoot device, almost as though it was straight from Half-Life 2. With these upgrades, the combat goes from mostly being about the reloading to mostly being about the pointing and shooting, which I find a lot more fun. It's just that you don't have enough targets to feel like you've had a proper fight until near the end of the game, and even then, ammo conservation is always weighing on every decision that you make. I never felt fully able simply to appreciate the combat for what it was. Most ended too soon for one reason or another. It's frustrating because the brilliance is there, but the game ends before it can reach that firefighting sweet spot. Maybe I'll get what I want in a future Half-Life game. There are 1,000 minigames suitable for the hacking in Half-Life Alyx, but rather unsurprisingly, Valve has chosen gameplay mechanics that work best in VR. As in, they would certainly be a lot less fun to try and beat with a mouse and keyboard. They require you to view and to manipulate 3D space in ways I haven't seen done before this point. Obviously, this is to showcase the new possibilities that VR enables. Though as these hacking minigames are only ever a means to an end, I'm not sure if I can call the minigames themselves fun. But each type feels functional and polished, and manages to ramp the difficulty up over the course of the game. Even the ones I didn't think could be made difficult enough to challenge me, occasionally did by the closing levels. The concept of teleporting through the levels in Half-Life Alyx has been a controversial one. I started my first playthrough with continuous movement because if I'm going to be making videos with this footage, I don't want the hassle of dealing with thousands of comments complaining about the movement type I'm using. But I decided to try teleporting midway through, then forgot to switch back to continuous again simply because it works. Teleporting may seem unnatural to viewers, but when you're actually playing it, movement becomes a thing you do, but your focus is on the more important stuff like aiming or looking around. Teleporting lets you get on with that more important stuff. I don't recall my time in Half-Life Alyx as being one of lots of jumps, but if I had one complaint about it, it's that continuous movement feels very slow in comparison, and that Valve should add a run option for players who want to use that option instead. Even when in continuous movement, if I came to a long straight segment, I'd sigh and then slip a few teleports in to speed things up a bit. As for nausea, I didn't get sick from any of the options. It was only when I tried the cinematic smoothing that I did, and that mode made me feel sick in about 20 seconds flat. Were it not for how long the nausea lasts, it would make for a great party game to play with friends before a night out. Something I am fond of is the health system. There is no armour, The only things like it are masks and helmets, which simply serve as get out of jail free cards to save you from the next barnacle you foolishly run into. Your health is measured in a simple 3 heart system, which I am much happier with. It's easier to understand that being shot takes 1 health point away, rather than 23 health points and 17 armour. A health station can heal all 3 hearts, while a health syringe will heal 1. I like the way the controllers vibrate when you're on super low health too. It feels like your heart's racing and strongly hints that you should make a beeline for the nearest health station. The game plays into many common phobias by having you walk through areas of pitch black, or having you shuffle around the edge of a large drop, or having to inject yourself with a nasty looking needle, or having a bug get crushed before its goo is stabbed into your hand by several nasty looking needles. Valve really utilised VR to make things seem more real. This game is designed to sell you on the concept of virtual reality. And this is helped by the wonderful graphical and audio design. You don't think there's anything wrong with the sound design in other games, but step into the world of Half-Life Alyx and you'll suddenly realise what the rest are missing. There are just so many small and area-specific details, and it transforms the environments into real, lived-in places. It's a shame for the experience to be interrupted by regular loading screens. You'll know when these are coming because you'll run into a room with nothing of interest in, and will think to yourself how this area's only purpose would be to act as a loading screen. And then it loads. These occur with about the same frequency as the ones found in Half-Life 2, to the point where I suspect Source 2 is just Source 1 but with prettier graphics. I installed this game on my SSD, and they were never more than 5 or 6 seconds long, but I've heard from others that their loading times were considerably longer than that. While the loading screens are so Source 1, graphically, Source 2 is here. And it reminds me in many ways of what Source was like back in 2004. By that I mean that this game isn't the best in any one way, it's just the best looking all round. It doesn't need ray-traced reflections or parallax-corrected bricks, or millions of strands of grass to do what it does. It just looks consistently great, convincingly cluttered and masterfully lit, and is testament to the incredible artistic talent in the Valve studio. And this time around, while people may complain about the system requirements, for what it looks like, it's insanely well optimised. To look comparable to other modern day games, whilst running at a high enough resolution and frame rate to make VR possible, is nothing short of a small miracle. And maybe what is needed to convince the masses that it's possible to have a no-compromise VR experience. It also transforms enemies from being avatars on the screen to being hefty lumps of meat that can quickly get too close for comfort. I never realised how large headcrabs actually are until now, and I love it when they launch themselves and go full ragdoll physics. I'm disappointed that I can't trap them under a bucket though, and I can't physically pick them up and fling them around whilst they're still alive and squirming. I'm disappointed that there's no melee element to fighting zombies either. Boneworks, despite its many flaws, did at least let you physically assault the enemies if you got close enough and when you had no other option. But for Half-Life Alyx to let you pick up a metal rod, and then not to let you bash a zombie over the head with it, is simply cruel and a major disappointment. Barnacles? Well, barnacles can go drop off a tall cliff for all I care. They're everywhere in this game, and I'm ashamed of the number of times they caught me out or sucked something off that I wanted for myself. Valve clearly identified that these things have the most potential in VR, and by the end of the game I can't think of another way they could have caught me out or deprived me of some kind of item. Antlions would be terrifying were their animations not so cartoonish. They went from moving like convincing bugs in Half-Life 2 to being some kind of Disney creation in this game, but with added gore. But in terms of gameplay, there's so much more to them this time around. It's satisfying to get a clean kill on one of these, and to have your accuracy rewarded with the ammunition left over. Manhacks have somehow become even more annoying as they've gotten faster and harder to dodge. If only you had a melee attack of some kind. The most challenging enemies have to be the Combine. My reflex sights may identify their heads as being weak spots, but they certainly don't feel weak as I pump round after round into them, seemingly without success. Sometimes they die and I don't even know it because the death sounds are a little delayed or quiet. When combined with the scavenging element, Combine soldiers require improvisation, usually with explosives, if you want to come out alive and with any ammunition left. These Combine are the most intimidating enemies of them all, especially in the opening chapters. Since you play as Alyx, who likely isn't as tall as I am, the Combine all appear to tower over me like formidable 6'6" super soldiers. They intimidate me, and this is helped by their animations. The motion capture in this game is the best that I've ever seen. When viewed at high frame rates, in VR and 3D, they may as well be real people in suits acting it out in front of me. I wasn't expecting this to be one of the game's most impressive features, but maybe I should have. Because back in 2004, Half-Life 2's characters and animations were years ahead of anything else at the time. Alyx shows that Valve has made major strides since then. Major strides. And while I can't fault the performances seen in many other modern games, there's just something about the Combine in Half-Life Alyx that makes them better. Which makes it such a shame that there isn't more chance to see them at their best. Half-Life 1 had scientist and security guard encounters all the way through. Half-Life 2 had several segments where you could just marvel at the drama unfolding between different NPCs. But Half-Life Alyx is a far more solitary affair. Which is odd because, like Valve said in the previews, it's got more dialogue than the earlier games. And I like Russell, his character is brilliantly realised. Alyx's back and forth with him is a great way of explaining gameplay mechanics and fleshing out the characters. But I don't know if I want Alyx to be fleshed out. The beauty of Gordon Freeman remaining silent was that he was whatever you wanted him to be. He could be 14-year-old 3 clicks Philip, or 30-year-old 2 clicks Philip. But Alyx is a 19-year-old woman, and a lot of her dialogue reflects that. Even if you wanted to roleplay as a 19-year-old woman, do you only want that option? This is one direction modern games have taken that I don't like. Both Deus Ex and Half-Life started a series where you could be whatever you wanted to be. Kill innocents? Sure. Save the world? Sure. Both? Sure. But as both have advanced, and as the worlds have become increasingly worth interacting with, your character's interactions with them have shrunk. With Half-Life, it's reached the point where you have no choice but to be Alyx instead of yourself. Also, her screams just don't do it for me. She was much more convincing when I let her die in Half-Life 2. If it's going to do this, the least it can do is to provide more opportunities to watch Russell awkwardly explain stuff to me in person. Much like the VR gameplay opportunities, it feels like we've barely scratched the surface of what the character animation in this game could achieve. I feel I've been extremely critical of Half-Life Alyx, and that it deserves a minute or so of unadulterated praise for one of its chapters. This chapter, of which you'll know about if you've played it, has to be among the most intense and terrifying in the history of gaming. Half-Life 2's Ravenholm section was critically acclaimed for its atmosphere and foreboding, but that's nothing compared with the one found in this game. This one makes you feel vulnerable and utterly helpless. Without a single word of dialogue, it communicated to me just how silly, how clumsy, and how predictable I was. I could practically visualise the people at Valve watching my playthrough and high-fiving each other as I suffered every step of the way. I fell into every trick and trap that it set for me, and the way it repeatedly got my hopes up before dashing them as it slowly dawned on me what I had to do next was nothing short of inspired. You'll know the bit I mean when you get to it. Half-Life Alyx is worth playing for this one chapter alone. It will be remembered as one of the greats. And if 14-year-old me had played this game, I don't think I would have made it past this chapter. Valve went too far with the terror aspect in this game, and I'm so pleased that they did. This is Valve at their best. This proves they've still got it, and maybe had this not set such a high bar, I'd have been more forgiving of the other chapters from the game. I just wish there had been more groundbreaking moments like that in this game for me. But instead, the bulk of the game was happy just being an immensely fun introduction to VR gaming, as proof that it can enable a more intense and vibrant gaming experience than can be had from mouse and keyboard. And I suspect that's exactly what Valve set out to create. Well done, you pulled it off and have left me wanting more. A lot more. I can't fault what's here, only what isn't. Maybe what I want can't exist just yet. Maybe VR needs to mature as a platform first, to give its player base time to master the fundamentals enough to enable VR's equivalent of Half-Life 2. In the meantime, now would be a great time to release some regular episodic content, Valve. Let's see if, this time, you can count to 3.
Alyx?